Hi, we're now going to do the bank reconciliation data and analytics assignment. Okay, so this question. So here we are looking at, we are a small retail store and we are looking at our end of month bank reconciliation. And we're going to look at all of the things that don't line up in our ledger for our own bank accounting statements versus the statements we get from the bank, right? So this is necessary at the end of every month to look at it and say, hey, are there transactions that show up in one place but not the other? So let's open this up and see what we have to do. So we can look at it and you could go through and you could look at the ID for every transaction. So imagine this is a check that you sent out, right? And the ID number is 17704 and the amount of the check is $460.64. So we could go down and we could look and say, do we have that check? Oh, here it is, 17704, $460.64. It lines up. We could say check, that one works. And then we could go to the next one, 18267 and that's $189.17. And we could skim down and say, 18267, $189.17. This could become tedious very quickly. So what we want to do is say, is there an automated way that Excel can compare these two values? And now it's hard to go through and say, well, compare the transaction ID, look at the withdrawal amount, look at the withdrawal amount. So instead, we're going to concatenate these, which means we're going to squish them together. We'll create one line where we have this transaction ID number and the amount number as one number, and then we can compare that from our ledger and the bank's ledger. Okay, so we look at this. If we want to concatenate something, we simply have to click on the first line. We use the little and symbol and the second row column. So in the same row, we click on column B and then column C with that little and sign in between. And presto, we get one that's concatenated together where it's squished together with those two things. I love to use this with text as well. You can add things together in your text in Excel. And we can just copy that all the way down. We do the same thing to combine the bank, right? So we say they equal the bank transaction and the amount, okay? And we copy that all the way down. So that's pretty cool, right? Now, the tricky thing is we want to do a comparison here. Now, it's kind of lucky. If you go into the instructions, it actually gives you the formula here that you can put directly into the G2. Okay, and so you can put this in, um, sorry, this goes into H2. So H2, right? And we put this in, and what it's doing is it is looking for a match. So it's looking at the G2 here, and it's looking to see if there's a match of this G2 anywhere in this D column. So you can see where it highlights the column. And so it's looking for G2 anywhere in there. If it doesn't, it'll give an error. Okay. And here it's saying if there's an error, then send back what is in F2. Okay. And so you're looking for that full concatenated number that's in G2. You're looking for it in the D column. Okay. And if you don't find it, you return what's in F2. If you do find it, don't return anything. That's what this right here is saying is don't return anything. Okay. So we put that in. Okay. So we put that in and then we copy it all the way down and you can see everywhere that there was something in the bank ledger, right, that did not show up in our ledger. So you look here and you say, okay, 147.88. So this line right here, it looked for this in G11 and didn't find it anywhere in the D column. So there must be either an error or there's a check that's missing or something, right? In this case, it's going to be an error because it's outstanding in the company, so it's showing up in the bank's ledger, but it's not showing up in ours, right? Which usually shouldn't happen. So there's some kind of error there. Now we're going to do the same thing in this I column, and again, it gives it to you right here in the instructions, so that makes it really easy to put that in there. But if you dig through it, you can understand exactly what it's asking you to do. So here you can see it's looking for what is in the D2 uh, cell, and it's looking for it in the G column. Okay. And if it doesn't find it, it's returning what is in the C2. Okay, so it looks for D2 in the G column, and if it doesn't find it, it returns C2. And you're going to do copy that all the way down. So we double click on the bottom right corner, it copies it down, and here we see everything that is showing up in your ledger, but not in the bank's ledger. Okay. So some of these could be checks that you wrote that haven't been deposited yet, and some of them could be errors, right? Where something was messed up. So we actually have to look at that and we'll analyze each of these. We have to analyze everything in the outstanding company and everything outstanding in the bank and figure out what's going on. So the next thing we do, let's create our pivot table, right? So let's insert a pivot table and we'll put it in a new workbook. I already filled in my table range. Okay. And so we can look down at question one. What is the difference between the amount of total withdrawals per company records compared to the amount of total withdrawals per the bank statement? So all we're saying is if we look at withdrawals by the company records, okay, and withdrawals by the bank records, those are the total amounts. And it's saying, what is the difference? Let's reread this. What is the difference? Okay. And these are the amounts. So we have the sum of withdrawals. So what is the difference between the two? Okay, and there we have it. All we had to do was subtract. So let's check our work, make sure we did that correctly. And really, it's just checking, is that what they're really asking for? And it was. Okay, so Q2, what is the difference between the number of withdrawals per company records compared to the number of withdrawals for the bank statement? And so here, instead of looking at the sum, we actually want to look at the count, right? So we're counting how many withdrawals there were. So let's look at the count. Okay. And there we had 40 according to company records and 32 according to the bank. Okay, so that means there's a difference of 8. Okay, good. Check our work. That's what they were looking for. Okay, Q3, what is the difference between the amount of outstanding items per company records compared to the amount of outstanding items per the bank statement? Wow, that's interesting, right? So we're just looking at the outstanding ones now. So whereas the first one was looking at all the withdrawals, now we're just looking at the outstanding for the company versus the bank. Okay. And so let's get this. It put it in the rows for us, but let's just look at the total values. It's at the count. We don't want count, right? We want to look at the sum because we're looking at the amounts. So we click on it, go to value field settings, and go to sum. And now we can look at the difference here, right? And there's a difference there. Okay, cool. It actually happened to be the same amount um, of the difference in outstanding ones. Okay, Q4. Now we're going to create two small pivot tables and put them side by side. And so, okay, so first we're going to look at outstanding company to the rows, and then the second one we're going to have outstanding bank to the rows. Okay, so let's see. This first one, we're just doing outstanding company. Okay. And then let's see if we can insert another pivot table. We insert a pivot table. And for our cells, we're going to do the same cells as before. Okay. And we're going to do the outstanding bank. Okay. So good. So the sum of outstanding, don't need the sum of outstanding. Let's see. We just want our outstanding into the rows. Okay, good. So in the first one, we have these are all of the ones that were the amounts of ones that were outstanding on the company statement, right? So they showed up on the bank ledger, they didn't show up on the company ledger. And then the second pivot table is outstanding for the bank. It showed up on the company ledger, but not on the bank ledger. Okay, so let's see what the question is. What is the amount of the fee that the bank charged company A for the month? Okay, so we have to figure out which one is going to be the fee. And what I would do here is let's list out. um, so if we're looking for the outstanding company, right, what do we want it to return? So let's look here, outstanding company. Here's one where it's the outstanding company. And I want to look at the ID number, right? So outstanding company matches here. I want the transaction ID for the bank because that'll give me something to look at. So I can look at the transaction ID for the bank, okay? And I put that in here, and that's a little hard for me to look at. What if I put it, I don't want to count. Maybe this will help me. No, nope, I didn't like it. Oh, okay, okay, this will work. I can look at the transaction ID for the bank. I'll just leave it like that, where they're both in the rows. And so here I can say, okay, this, that looks a little cleaner. No, no, it doesn't. It hides it for me. Um, I can say, you know what, these that outstanding companies showed up in the bank, right? Well, these had actually like check numbers to them, right? Or PO numbers or whatever they are. This one had a weird, funky thing. So this is actually going to be the fee from the bank. I hope that makes sense. And so we could say, okay, the fee from the bank is going to be $75. Okay, so let's check that. Okay, good. Okay, B, company A made a transposition error in entering an amount that is in its records for a check it had written. Although the amount on the check was correct, what is the correct amount that should have been entered into its records? Okay, so this is kind of interesting. I like to call this fat fingers. Okay, so there was some amount that was correct on the check, which means the bank had the right amount, but it was the wrong amount in the company records. Okay, so let me put this in here. Bank outstanding. I'm going to do the same thing we did before. If it was bank outstanding, right? Let's see, bank outstanding is here. So I want the transaction ID for the company, so I can match it up. So transaction ID for the company. Oh, that looked nice. See that? That's really nice and pretty. Let's see if I can change the other one like this to sum of transaction ID for the company. Let's see. And I put this down here, and I want the sum there. Okay, that can work. So, okay, so now I can look at this. And so there was one of them that was the correct amount on the check, so for the bank, but was incorrect for what I had in my record. So it's going to be one of these two that doesn't match up here. Okay. And so let's look at 49765. 49765. The check said 174.88. I put in my records 147.88. So that was obviously incorrect. Okay. So there's the problem right there. Okay, 174.88 is the correct amount. What's it asking for? What is the correct amount? Okay, 174.88. Let me make sure I said that right. 174.88. We check it. Oh, what is the correct amount? That should have been entered in its records. Company A made a transposition error in entering amount in its records for a check it had written. Although the amount on the check was correct, what is the correct amount that should have been entered into its records? So that's interesting. So maybe they're saying it should be the 147.88. So let's check that one. Okay, that's what they're looking for. I think that's worded weird. So that's worded kind of strange in the question. Okay, let's look at C. Company A made an error in recording one of its transaction IDs. What was the amount of the corresponding withdrawal? Okay, so one of the IDs was typed in wrong. Now, I'm going to guess it's this one, right? Because that's the only thing that's left. I'm gonna highlight that just so we remember. So this one was 843.04. Here we have an 843.04, right, amount, but the transaction ID 43448, 43438. So there's the issue, right? So these should actually be the same thing. So that was just a mistake. So it's asking for the amount 843.04. So 843.04. Check that. Cool. Okay, what is the total amount of outstanding checks that were recorded in the company records but did not appear on the bank statement? Okay, so outstanding checks. So so we know here's all the things that were outstanding. We know that this one and this one were not outstanding checks. They were just typos. So everything else is going to be an outstanding check. So we can look at the sum, right, of all of these minus the two that were incorrect and were just errors. And so this should be the sum of outstanding checks then. So let's put that in there. Okay, awesome. Okay, so company A updates its cash balance based on the reconciliation. So what is going to happen when we look at our cash balance? So here is what, the mistakes were on our company records. So on our balance in our own ledger. And so we can look at this and say, well, we know that we're going to have to actually subtract off $75 for this fee. Okay, so that's easy. We know we have $75 to subtract off. What other mistake do we have? Well, the green one's the same, so that didn't change the value because that was just an ID mistake. But this yellow one highlighted, that one actually is going to be an error in what we typed. So we need to actually add back in the difference between the 174.88 and the 147.88. Okay, so we can say it's going to be minus 75, but then plus the difference between the 174 and the 147. So it's going to be a negative $48. So let's see, here we go. It's a decrease into the cash balance of $48. Presto. So thank you. I hope this helps, and I look forward to seeing you in a little bit.